Well, it is officially training camp week for your Seattle Seahawks. And today, Michael-Shawn Dugar, longtime beat reporter for the Seahawks, been covering them for about 8 years now, writes for The Athletic, is coming on the show. He'll share his insights on the eve of veterans reporting for training camp, some updates on where some of the injured players are physically at the moment, who the most important player the Seahawks need to see back on the field and healthy soon, and some fascinating perspective on what the ceiling of this team might be, as well as the floor, and how far away this team might be from the other teams in the NFC West, all three of the other teams in the NFC West. Michael-Shawn Dugar joining me next on Seahawks Forever.
Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viens.
If you've had a busy summer weekend, a couple of episodes you might want to catch up on. My conversation with Sean Syed on Saturday from Sumer Sports did an extensive analytical breakdown of how the XFL handled the kickoff rule that the NFL has adopted in the 2023 season, charted all 407 kickoffs from that year. Great guest, great conversation. Check that out. I'll put that link down below. And also did a live stream last night. Bryce Coots of Hawks Own Rundown podcast joined me, just kind of getting ready for training camp. Talked about a wide variety of subjects, took your questions, had some really good ones. So check that out as well. But let's not waste any time. Hit that like button, thumbs up, subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit the bell for notification of future episodes. I will put all the other ways to support me and the channel down in the description below. But I want to get to this conversation. Michael-Shawn Dugar was kind enough to take some time out of his busy schedule. Also has a new baby in the house. And so that certainly is a lot on his shoulders, as well as getting ready to cover training camp. So this is my conversation moments ago with Mike from The Athletic. Mike, I appreciate you taking the time on what is going to be an eventful week for you. A long off season, an eventful off season, lots of changes. Your first training camp under Mike McDonald about to get started. How many camps is this for you covering the Seahawks now?
My first year was 2017. So however many years that is, 2017, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24 is the eighth camp. Yeah, year 8 on the beat.
Do you have one moment, one memory that kind of stands out from all the Pete Carroll training camps that you've covered up until this point?
Yes. I have, well, specifically the training camp. My first one is what really stands out because I was kind of like, not starstruck is probably a little bit too strong, but I have been covering, high school football in Idaho for a little bit, and covering the University of Idaho Vandals. So to see like Richard Sherman walk by and Russ, I was like, oh, it's the big leagues now.
It's a little bit of a jump. Yeah.
Yeah. So that stood out. That was also the year Frank Clark punched Jermaine Ifedi, knocked smooth out. And I just remember thinking, oh my God, these guys are nuts. So that was my first camp where I was just like, man, it's what everyone says it is. The hyper competitiveness, the fan base, like just seeing how crazy guys go for Russ. And how what people are willing to do to just get his autograph. Like you got people just you see dads and parents like, all right, I can't get up there, but if I send my kid with the football, Russ will get him, it would just people stepping on kids to get get Cam Chancellor autograph. It was nuts, man. It was chaos. I could feel the love that the fan base had for the team. And you could see the talent up close, I love training camp because of how close we are. Proximity to the players. We're inches away from the plays sometimes. One of the tryout guys this past training camp, or excuse me, like spring ball, OTAs, whatever, he threw a pass so bad I almost caught it. That's how close. I think it was Tua's little brother tried to throw a ball and it was so bad I almost caught it. I just had to step out of the way. It was that bad, but that's how close I was to the action. Right. I guess the point of that anecdote. So I just love that you really get to hear the trash talk. I can't report on it. At least not, responsibly, but like I can hear it, and I can use that to contextualize some of the reporting that I do, and guys' personalities and stuff like that. And you really feel how important like juice and energy is at camp. because like everyone's fired up on like day 1 or day 2 or something, but like day 12, like whoever's bringing the juice then is really bringing it.
Yeah.
Like that's who's really a ball of energy. With some days that'll be a Jamal Adams, or some days that's DK telling somebody they suck or that they can't guard him, or some days that would be Devin Witherspoon is kind of like that now. Just Jaron Reed can get like that. It's just fun to kind of see that stuff. You feel it a lot closer than when we're like not 8 stories up, but probably like 3, 4. We're pretty far away anyway. I'm not gonna put a number on it when we're at Lumen Field. Like we're not close to the action at all. So
Right.
I love camp for that reason. The proximity is priceless.
What's that line like, and how fine is it being a reporter trying to stay objective, and also you're around these guys all the time? Certainly relationships are forged and chemistry is had. How do you balance that and walk that line?
And it's a lot. It's getting a lot tougher, because the print journalist is probably like the last one who even just has to pretend to be objective. Like even if you're not, you at least gotta like feign objectivity. Whereas pretty much everyone else can kind of, I won't say fanboy out, but they can definitely cross that line without repercussion. On the radio, that's pretty easy, particularly if you work for the flagship station for whatever team is there. You can kind of be like, all right, yeah, this is you're happy for the team, you're rooting for their success. You use words like we, when you're talking about the team. Whereas I'm not supposed to do that, whereas in TV, people are the same way. No one cares if the local TV person is like gung-ho for the, Seahawks, or if they end their segment saying go Hawks, like no one cares. A lot of that stuff is sponsored too by the team. There's broadcast agreements there. And then now everyone has a podcast, and everyone has a podcast, unless you're a print person. Like podcasts are not necessarily, they're not inherently adversarial, whereas like, press setting is far more combative, kind of inherently. It's like we're trying to extract information and their goal is not to give it, whereas in a podcast, it's like they agreed to be there. So they agreed to talk. So it's not like I'm like, if I get, for example, DK Metcalf, perfect example. If I was to talk to DK Metcalf after he gets thrown out of a game, I'd be like, yo, why did you get thrown out? And, it'd be a different tone. I would feel obligated journalistically to ask about like that, or his personal foul conducts. If DK came on the pod, I would probably not ask him about none of that, because we were there to just like, just chop it up and have a good time, and if that's like your primary medium, you can kind of exist in that space. Whereas I have to ask the stuff that needs to be asked, not the stuff you want to ask. And it feels like we're the only ones left, we being traditional print beat writer press, is the only people left that have to do that. National people don't have to do that. If you're a talking head on like a national platform, you're a Colin Cowherd, Skip, Stephen A, Shannon Sharp, you can just kind of say whatever, and you ain't in the locker rooms. Who cares if you say Geno Smith trash? You ain't never go see Geno, but the Super Bowl, maybe, on Radio Row, maybe at a party, that's it. Whereas I can't just get up here and call the O-line trash. I got to go in there every day. Ain't no security in there. So it's just a different bag that we're kind of the last ones to operate, in that space. You see people like I was just telling a player the other day, I was like, man, he just dropped some merchandise. This is last year actually, but I was like, man, I wish I could buy it, but I'm not really supposed to wear Seahawk gear. Like I can give it to my wife or like my homies or something like that. But everyone else, you can kind of see the difference. So it is a fine line. I even had to deal with this a little bit, not like in a bad way, but like I did a story last year where I went to Quandre Diggs' crib, and that's like that's obviously a sacred space. His kids is in there, his wife and everything. His whole, his nephews was there staying with him at the time. So it's like, that's a really sacred space you're letting me into. And it's just like, can I build that relationship to the point where you're willing to let me come to your crib for a few days in Texas, but at the same time, trust that I'm going to be honest in my coverage, that if you miss a tackle or blow an assignment, that I'll still be critical about it in a way that's not demeaning or whatever. We're not buddy because I came to your crib. I'm still a reporter, but we still cool to a certain extent. You know what I mean? Like, and Quandre is the homie. It is a tough line. It really is just mostly tough because I feel like we're the only ones that have to still toe it. Everyone else can kind of just be like, go Hawks, guys, I would never say that. You know what I'm saying? Like, is it great if Seahawks win? Of course. Other guys individually, I think, are good people that I'm rooting for. No, duh. But it's just like I'm not just rooting for the team success. I'm rooting largely for the team success because that means my success. They go 14-3. I probably get a raise. My numbers look great. Everybody reading my stuff. Everyone asking me to come on their show and everything like that. That's why I root for the team success selfishly, because that's what I want. I'm from Seattle as well, but yeah, it's very tough, man. And it's something it's happening in real time. It's very fluid, very, very, very fluid. And then that's before you factor in like all these player podcasts. Like now there's not even an incentive for DK to come on my show when he can just go talk to Shannon Sharp, or he can go talk to RG3 or Ryan Clark or whatever. He can go talk to other players who he feels at least can humanize him better. Not to say DK's turned me down or anything, but I'm just using him as an example. Yeah.
Well, and the fans love it. The viewers love it, right? Let me ask you this. We've seen the popularity of shows that give access, right? We've seen quarterbacks on Netflix last year, obviously receivers now this year, and we get to see the human side. We get to see these guys away from football. We also get to see, just how much the sport means to them, the things we don't get to see on the field that aren't on the record. And it's gotten to the point now that it's almost 24/7. The Seahawks have always been a little bit more guarded about giving that kind of access. They have their own YouTube series now, but they kind of just dip their toe in. They don't give you too much like some of these other organizations do. I don't know if you've had a chance to watch the offseason New York Giants one yet, but that one's different. First time we've seen free agency process. We're about to see the draft process in the next episode. They've given so much access and let you in so much that, that last episode, especially when Joe Shane had to tell John Mara that they weren't going to get Saquon, that was awkward and kind of cringy. Can you go too far there? Like, are some of these teams, you think the Giants might look back, Joe Shane in particular, and maybe regret that they're letting people in a little too much?
I think that when you control, at the end of the day, you're getting control of the narrative, which is all you really want, And I think the Giants had to sign off on all that stuff coming out, so they've seen it all. Now you can sign off on it and just not think it's going to be perceived, a certain way. For instance, Mike McDonald, really good example. He probably didn't care that people knew that he took all those pictures and stuff down, but probably had no idea that it would be perceived a certain way. Like, oh my God, why do people care that I took down these signs that say always compete? That's the other guy's stuff. Of course I took it down. But you see what that did kind of riled a lot of people up. So I don't think they'll regret it per se, but I do think we're overcorrecting a little bit here, because you look at some of these documentaries and stuff. Now they're all produced by the subject of the doc, and that's just not how it goes. Blame Michael Jordan for this a little bit. Like, he had way too much creative control over The Last Dance, and now everyone's like, I'll just produce my own doc. Steph Curry got a doc, and there's a bunch of other ones that are just like, okay, the person this is about had just too much control, or control was given in exchange for the access. Kind of how I felt about the Johnny Manziel one. It just feels, Steph Curry's, I think, is called like underrated. And I'm just like, dog, he was a top 10 pick, bro. He's a top 10 pick, son of an NBA player. Yeah. Being underrated is you're doing a little bit here, like it feels like, gonna feel like I'm shitting on Steph a little bit. But as an example, Reggie Miller, I think, opens that doc reading negatives from Steph's draft profile. And it's like, dog, he was like the 8th pick. It's not like you went undrafted. No matter what the negatives were, you were still like the 8th. He was the 7th or 8th pick. It doesn't matter which pick, but you get the point. It's nuts. So I feel like we're overcorrecting a little bit, because now everyone wants all that control of their narrative, whether that's going on the podcast or having your own podcast. Like, the idea of having a show while you're on the team still, like, even just 4 years ago when Russ had Danger Talk, I thought that was like fascinating. But now, Micah Parsons has a show, the Kelseys have a show, Draymond Green on the NBA side, Patrick Beverly on the NBA side, Paul George on the NBA side. There's just all of this. The players, like, there's an overcorrection to cutting out the middleman, and I do feel like we gotta spin it back a little bit. Not so they can't control it, but it's like the journalists do exist for a reason. There's a level of objectivity there. There's like steering the conversation the right way. There's follow-up questions, that need to be asked in some cases. That's letting somebody else get their side of the story off. In a lot of cases, in a podcast, you can just tell a story that involves someone else, and they just have no say over the spin of it. You know what I mean? Like, it's pretty crazy to see in real time a lot of the times, because you see it honestly with Shannon Sharp a little bit. Like, he'll have a guest up there, and they'll talk crazy about someone else, and the other person will like tweet Shannon because they'll be cool with him, or they'll call him like, yo, Shannon, why you let so-and-so get up there and just say that about me? Blah, like, that's not how it really went. Let me be your next guest. And then it just completes the
Right.
cycle.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like we need to spin it back a little bit to, all right, you run the show, but like there's a host that's steering it, or like there's a journalist up there. Like after a while, I feel like we still matter in the dialogue. I feel like we've kind of gone a little bit too far, and it's letting everyone else just kind of control the narrative, but then like change it. That's not the point. You can control it, but the goal is to still be truthful, and still be truthful and fair. And I feel like the way we're going now, everyone's just kind of like pressing record and getting the shit off, and that's dangerous.
I like the excess. I like the give and take and kind of the both sides of the coin. I'm old fashioned though, and that's why I like what The Athletic does. It's still kind of hanging on to the sort of the last bastion of print journalism when it comes to covering local sports, which is why I like what you do so much. So let's talk about the team, where you got a glimpse of how Mike Macdonald and his new staff conduct camp and how it's different than how Pete Carroll does it. But it gets a lot more serious now with the full squad reporting this week. The big news kind of initially the last few days anyway has been some of the names on the PUP list and the non-football injury designation list. A couple of those names have already come off and passed physicals. But the two that I think make the most people nervous are those two inside linebackers, right? Terrell Dodson, Jerome Baker. They weren't available for any of the OTAs, any of the mini camps. Although Mike Macdonald, the last time we heard from him, he sounded optimistic they were going to be ready for training camp. And so I think it was a little jarring to some people to see their names on the list. They could pass their physicals tomorrow and be ready. But what are you hearing about those two guys and where they're at?
The thing about the PUP list, and honestly, to be honest, I haven't heard much. I've been on paternity leave until like
Congratulations, by the
July
way.
15th. Yeah, thank you. I've been a little bit out of the loop until this last week, which is why if you notice, I haven't written much or dropped any pods like this last week or so. But the thing about PUP is, I'm not surprised that they're on it because you only get kind of one shot. It's almost like a use it or lose it timeout type of thing. Like if I start you on PUP and then let's say you just pass your physical the next day, that's fine, as opposed to the inverse where you pass but you're not really ready, and then like you tweak something the 2 days into camp. It's like, well, damn, I can't put you on PUP now because then you gotta miss some games,
Right.
or like I can't do that. Whereas if I just start you on it as a precaution until you were absolutely ready, it's just better. That's probably why Abe's on it as well, where it's just like there's no point in rushing Abe back, because if something goes wrong, I can't just retroactively add him there because then he's stuck there and it gets worse, in terms of when we can get him back on the field. So I'm not too alarmed quite yet, particularly with Jerome, because I think he just broke his wrist or something like that, fractured it, something that heals quick. Yeah, the ones I worry about in general are backs and knees, because those just football hurts too much for those to get better. Your shoulder can be fine, wrists, ankles, quads, tendons, and all that. Even groins heal up eventually with some rest. But you got a guy with a bad back, that's usually not good. That usually doesn't get better playing more football. Knees can kind of be the same way depending on what you do, but you want more information on the knee. Like Pete was notoriously ominous with his updates on Abe on his knee. It was just like, dude, did he sprain something? Did he tear something? Like, what's going on? Never really told us. Just like some soreness, pain, lingering words that don't really mean much when you go back and read them. So if anything, I'm more concerned about that and whatever the mystery injury is to Dotson, because I can't diagnose something I don't know, which body part we're talking about here. So really Abe is what scares me more than anything, because like, man, it's not like, I feel like there's not too many ways to finesse a bad knee for a guy who doesn't leave the field. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like you can just tap his head. Jamal used to talk about how he would like to keep his knee warm on the sideline, and they were like managing his snaps at one point. You can't really do that with your right tackle. It's like, bro, I need you there 100% of the snaps, going against the best athletes on the field every time. So I haven't heard anything about Abe's knee either, but more than perhaps Jerome and Dotson is Abe, who I'm really focused on, because I think he controls both the floor and the ceiling of the offensive line room. To like, if he's gone, the bottom drops out, as we've kind of seen at parts of times last year. Would they start 3 different right tackles last year? 4 maybe. One of them being Jason Peters, who's older than the current head coach. Whereas if you have Abe, I feel like your ceiling is way higher. I feel like you can do so much with your scheme if you just know, man, 72's got it. I feel like you could see that last year as well. So he's the guy. Whenever we get to talk to Mike McDonald on Wednesday, we'll let the fluffy questions about how was the first day vibes. It can get those out, but then I'm jumping right in there like, yo, what's up with 72? Like,
Yeah.
I need to know. We need to know something about what's going on with him.
Yeah. When it comes to those linebackers, how far do you push it before we start talking about potential acquisitions? I mean, if we get into week 2 or 3 of camp, Terrell Dodson, I mean, you sound pretty optimistic about Baker, and that was an injury they knew about when they signed him. It was lingering from last year, so he had already started that process. But let's say we get into camp and Terrell Dodson just isn't ready to go 2 weeks from now. At what point do we start talking about going out on the, there aren't a lot of guys available, but a guy like Zach Cunningham, who was still productive last year for the Philadelphia Eagles, or maybe making a move, or do you push that thing all the way up until the end and maybe look at when the cuts happen to 53?
I think you monitor all of it, and they assign guys to do that too. Like they keep a running list of like, hey, if this guy goes down, we got this guy, the agent on speed dial, blah blah blah. So they're pretty proactive about that. John's staff is, but I think that really depends on what you got in house. They just drafted a linebacker. They still have guys like Radigan. Actually, is Radigan still around? I can't even remember. But
yeah, he was getting the first team reps. He and Patrick O'Connell.
Yeah, you can tell I was on leave for a little bit. But Patrick O'Connell.
Thought we were breaking some news there for a second.
Yeah, you got some guys that are there in house. I don't know how good any of these guys are, but you do have to see them first. Because I mean, if Tyrese Knight hits, and you're just like, oh, wait a minute, hey, this is great. We got some cheap labor going on, because that's really what you need. Your goal as a roster, in terms of roster construction, is how many guys are going to outplay their deals. That's what you want. You want a certain percentage, I would imagine, of guys outperforming whatever you're paying them. That's why the draft is so important. You get a guy who's a Pro Bowler on a rookie deal, like, wow, this ROI is insane. So I think you got to see what you got in those guys first. John Snyder jokingly called Mike McDonald the linebacker guru on draft weekend. All right, man, let's see. Is he to linebackers what Pete was for DBs, where he could just raise the floor on a DB. That was the thing. Like, obviously, there were some guys who hit some pretty good ceilings, like a Sherm or something like that. But I think what was most impressive about Pete was he could raise a guy's floor. It's like, I can pretty much get anyone starting caliber, whether that's Jeremy Lane or Byron Maxwell or even Trey Flowers, Shaquille Griffin. Shaquille probably would have been starting caliber regardless, but Trey Brown, even Reek right off the bat, like all these guys who were day 3 draft picks or even not drafted at all, like a Deshaun Shedd, got to starting caliber, floors where it's just like, man, look, I can get it. So when you in the starting lineup, we not cooked. That's impressive. If Mike can do the same thing at linebacker, then I think they can be okay. It's a lot to ask, but you're the head coach. You get to pay the big bucks, for a reason.
Talk about floor and ceiling. Ceiling is something that when you look at this roster, there's a lot of youth, right? It's a very young roster. It's spread out throughout the position groups, which gives you the potential for ceiling and upside. A lot of the top 100 lists are coming out now. We're not seeing a lot of Seahawks on it. The latest one, Devin Witherspoon, the only one in the top 100. That's unusual. We're not used to seeing a dearth of names like that. But just being around the team, as you say, up close, just seeing the way guys carry themselves, trying to project a little bit how certain guys are going to fit in this new scheme. Who are some players that you think are on the cusp that a year from now, this time next year, we might be talking about, okay, that guy ascended into that top 100 territory?
Abe, for sure, if healthy. I just think Abe's their best lineman. I mean, the best version of DK is that, for sure. Like, it's not even like ascend per se. It's just, do the numbers match? Like, he can be that guy. I think Ken is like borderline, probably top 10 guy, his position. If he gets the right number of targets, or just touches. I don't even want to limit it to just carries, because Ken can catch. He had a couple one-handers last year. He's a really, really sure-handed guy, generally speaking. So I think those two stand out. And I think the best version of Reek can get in that conversation as well. A healthy Reek can join Spoon in there. I think right now, if I had to like compare it to like the teams of the past, I feel like there's a lot of this team's like it's like 22 KJs, in terms of like talent. Like KJ was always like a really good linebacker, really good, really solid, really consistent. His ceiling was pretty high, his floor was pretty high as well. I think, but he only made like one Pro Bowl.
Right.
And maybe he got snubbed like once or twice, but you didn't feel like it was egregious, because you could look around the league and understand like, oh, Bowman made it over him, or Patrick Willis, or Luke Kuechly, or either one of the guys whose last name was Kendricks. Like you just kind of, you never felt like, oh damn man, like
one of the guys.
Why can't I know there's Lance and Eric, but I just can't remember which one.
They were both good. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And they were both good,
Right.
So it doesn't matter. So you could feel it. You just knew he was good. And Cliff, I think, was in the same boat. Or it's just like Cliff was consistently good. I think he made a couple Pro Bowls, but we weren't ever really talking about like Cliff on the All-Pro team. Same with KJ. This team like feels like it's a bunch of Cliff and KJs. It's a bunch of really good players at their spots who they're starters. You want them on the team for a while. But to get over the hump, you need some Bobbies. You need some Sherms, and obviously that's a tough ask. These are some of the best guys ever at their spots, but this is what the Niners have. This is what the Lions have. I'm just looking just at NFC. There are guys, there are all pro dudes on these other teams you got to go through to get where you want to be. The Niners have, I think they had, you mentioned the top 10 list that ESPN had of each position. I think the Niners had like 9 guys, on these lists. It's nuts. Deservedly so, too. It was not even like you're reaching. It's Kittle, it's Trent Williams, it's Bosa, it's Fred, it's Hafunga, it's Christian McCaffrey, it's Debo and Ayuk. Jesus, they're just loaded. Charvarius Ward, they have more of what the Seahawks used to be, whereas they have really, really, really high-level dudes, elite all-pro caliber guys. Whereas the Seahawks right now seem like they have just a bunch of good players, which, it's football. You want a bunch of good players, but you need difference makers to go over the hump. This is not a team that they're not looking at this as if, all right, we got Mike Macdonald, so this is like our frisky fill-out year. We're trying to win. We're trying to win now. We're trying to win a division. Own the West. That's probably the one sign that Mike Macdonald could have kept up in the building is win the West if Pete had one of those in there, because that mandate did not change. Jody did not come in here and fire all the coaches for a rebuild. She told John, go win. She didn't tell John, go rebuild. She could have fired John, too, if she wanted to rebuild. She kept John to keep the winning mindset to go win. So that's where I'm like I'm not as maybe optimistic as a lot of people on where the Seahawks can go. I think the ceiling is probably like 10 or 11 wins, but I think the floor is pretty low, lowest it's ever been. Probably the whole thing could bottom out, I think, and be like a 4-win team. A couple injuries go the wrong way or something.
Yeah.
Just because of all the newness and the fact that the team is just a bunch of really good players. And how often can you expect those guys to be great? Because we have seen some games where you're like, oh man, boy, it looks outstanding. It's like, oh my goodness, the other team can't guard DK. Spoon's the best player on the field today. But that's like here and there.
Yeah.
How often is that like going to happen? Can that happen 10 times next year for, to go 10-7 or whatever? Can that happen when you play the Niners? Just that. Right. Can it happen just when you play San Francisco and the Rams? When you're playing in your own division, So I think that's the bigger question about the talent. How often can these guys go from good? Can they go from being being KJs and Cliffs to Bobbies and Sherms?
It's an interesting comparison and perspective. You think back to when Mike Macdonald came back from Michigan, took over the DC role in Baltimore, didn't hit right away. It took about a half a season for him to kind of get that thing really rolling. And you can make the argument then that when he took over that squad, bunch of good players, but it wasn't until they went out and acquired Roquan Smith that it really went to another level. And then he developed Madubuike, and it kind of went from there and found the role for Kyle Hamilton. It wasn't, it was a lot of good pieces, but it wasn't until he went out and got that dude that it all kind of came together.
All pro guy. Yeah.
Really interesting perspective. When we talk about the rest of the division then, because I think you're the first guy I've talked to, and granted in the type of podcasts I do, and I talk to a lot of other guys that do Seahawks content, we tend to be a little more optimistic, right? We tend to shy away from the 4-win floor like you're talking about, but that's your job, and you're able to be a little bit more objective, I think, than guys like me sometimes. As hard as I try, I really try, and I feel like the older I get, the more cynical I get. But still, I tend to lean towards the optimistic. Let me ask you the question this way then, because I wanted to get your feelings about the lay of the land in the NFC West, with where you feel like all the teams are right now, kind of coming off their off seasons. Are the Seahawks closer right now, in your opinion, to the Rams and 49ers or the Cardinals?
That's a good question. I think framed that way, they're probably close to the Rams and I say that largely because I am of the belief that Aaron Donald is the best football player I have ever seen. I just personally, position be damned, that's the best football player I've ever seen, and he just raises your ceiling so dramatically because there's just gonna be some snaps where you're like, wow, the other team had a plan, but the Rams had number 99. I mean, we saw it in the Super Bowl, for crying out loud. Like they had a plan, and then you just couldn't block 99, so it was over. Damn your plan. Without him, I do feel like they come down a little bit. I'm also have no idea what they plan to do in the secondary. I know they got names, but I'm just like, that's not encouraging at all. When you're relying on, like, I feel so bad for Tre'Davious White. It's like, man, that's the wrong team to go to if you're coming off of 2 lower leg injuries. You know, just that home turf. You know, that I've seen SoFi just eat up guys' knees and stuff. But so I think they're a little closer to them. I think the Rams offense is going to just hum like usual. I think Stafford's really good. I think McVay and Stafford are just kind of locked in a way that it's really hard to stop when they get rolling. But I think defensively, like, it wouldn't surprise me if the Seahawks had a better defense than the Rams, for instance. Like, I think the Rams losing Raheem Morris, which everybody who plays for Raheem will tell you, like, that's the guy. You know, so losing him and then losing Aaron Donald, I just think that's a bigger talent drain than their acquisitions maybe make up for. Whereas I think the Seahawks are probably just as talented, you know, as them, and I think they probably have the better defensive mind on this side of things. So, yeah, I'd say maybe close to the Rams for that reason, but I think both of them are very far from the 49ers. I think, like, I'm a few episodes behind on the Hard Knocks, but I watched all of Receiver, and my conclusion, among the fact, outside of, like, these guys are warriors in terms of pain tolerance, my other takeaway was, man, the Niners should have won the Super Bowl. Yeah, that was by far the best team in the league last year, and they just, I mean, they were a couple plays away from being champs. So I think that everyone is far away from the Niners, other than maybe Detroit in the NFC, and even then, I'm a little skeptical of their secondary outside of Kirby and Brian Branch. So yeah, I think the Seahawks are pretty far away. You know, because there's no reason to think that Mike McDonald's just like the magic elixir, you know, to just catch up to the Niners. The Niners are a machine. Yeah, they got dudes. They execute. They show up in big games. You know, one of the best individual performance I think I've seen, let's go 5 years back, I guess, is Debo saying that the Eagles secondary is trash, going to Philly, scoring 3 touchdowns on them, you know, just being like, yeah, see, you guys are trash, like I said. You know, that was incredible. You know, that's how they get down over there. They'll talk and then just go execute. You know, they're not unbeatable, clearly, but they sure do look like it when they play the Seahawks. So until I see evidence of the contrary, I'm just going to continue to think there's a gap there.
It's funny. I came away with the same impression about, and really last year, the thing that stood out the most from the quarterback series to me was the Kirk Cousins storyline, the beating he took, and how, you know, as a quarterback, which you don't think about as much, those guys, you know, are protected as much as they can be. But this year, geez, you almost feel like they should have followed 10 guys, because 5 of them were ultimately going to get hurt, and then they could focus on the other 5. The other thing that stands out to me about that series, and I hate it, but I hate how damn likable George Kittle is. It's really hard as a Seahawks fan to try to hate the 49ers, but that guy's fun to watch. He's fun to watch.
Yeah, man. And those guys, they are what the Seahawks want to be, and they want to be a team that dominates on both sides, plays with swagger. You know, like they come out with the boombox dancing and stuff every time. They almost like got a signature intro, like a college team. You know, like they got good vibes over there. They got good players, you know, and they're not like gimmicky. You know, like I can see not being sold on like the Dolphins necessarily because they feel a little bit more gimmicky, whereas the Niners are like, no, we're about to run this ball, you know, with whoever we want. And then when we need to throw it, we're going to make it happen, you know, and our defense is going to play hard, play with swagger, get after you, you know, like they're constructed really, really well. And then again, until I see evidence of the contrary, they are the top dog.
Yeah, and obviously they have a couple of key injuries on defense. They have to wait out Hufanga and Greenlaw, but if Seahawks fans aren't going to want to hear this, but the impression also I get with the 49ers this year is they seem like that team that is going to beat the Super Bowl hangover. It doesn't feel like they're wired in such a way that's gonna affect them negatively the way it does so many other teams did. The Rams a couple of years ago. We've seen it here in Seattle. They feel like a team that it's only inspired them even more.
Yeah, I mean, you see Kittle saying on the sideline after they lost the first Super Bowl, like, I'm coming back. And so you just see how he's wired, and you're just like, okay, one of their leaders is like, we're getting back here. Like, and mentality aside, they keep putting themselves in the conversation. They've been in 4 of the last 5 NFC championships, I think. So as long as you keep putting yourself in position, at that point, you just need a couple plays to break right your way. They probably go to the Super Bowl in 2021 if the ball doesn't hit. I think it was either Jimmy Ward or Tart right in the chest, that Stafford threw. If he catches that ball, they probably go back. They go that year that the Rams won too, and I think they would have beat the snot out of the Bengals that year. So, yeah, I think that's the team. That's the team you measure yourself against. I felt that way coming into the 2020 season. I think it was like, you got to catch the Rams. You got to start with your division. The Seahawks have no business worrying about anybody in the AFC, because by the time you get there, you're the best team in the NFC. Worry about your conference, and in this conference, you got to be able to go to Dallas and win. You got to be able to go to Detroit and win. Which the Seahawks, for all their flaws, can do that. They can go to Detroit and win. They keep doing it. I have to stay in the same hotel or on the same type of year on the same flight to Detroit every season the last couple of years, and I'm doing it again. So they can go there, but can you go to Green Bay and win? Can you go to San Francisco? Can you beat San Francisco at all? Whether the game's in Pakistan or in the Bay, can you beat these guys? So they got some legit questions. I think if the ceiling is 10 or 11 and the floor is like 4 or 5 wins, the answer's probably right in the middle. That's probably where I can see them ending up.
Well, we'll start to get some of those answers. Veterans report tomorrow, right? Take physicals, things like that. Wednesday on the field, is that the timeline?
Correct.
And then
Wednesday on the field.
And then we'll hear from some players and coaches, Mike McDonald on Wednesday for the first time in a while. So, Mike, I really appreciate your time, man. I could do this all day, but I know you got things to do and you got a new baby to tend to. So really appreciate you taking the time to come on.
Yeah, thank you for having me, man. You have a good one. Enjoy camp, too.
All right, man. You too. That is the brand new single from my friend Stephen Douglas and his band Stephen Douglas and Company. It's called Gone. It just hit Spotify yesterday. Check it out if you'd like to. Give me your thoughts on the conversation that I just had with Mike. What do you think about the ceiling comment? I thought that was the most fascinating part of that. As I said, he's one of the first that I've heard that have said that is a possibility. It's within the realm of potential outcomes for the Seahawks team. And also some of the comments he had to say about the talent level on the defense. I thought it was fascinating that he used Cliff Averill and KJ Wright as comparisons, because while both of those guys, as he said, were never all pros or in those top 100 conversations that often throughout their career, they were never overlooked really or underrated. I think if you asked players and coaches around the league, they would all say, oh yeah, Cliff Averill's a really good player. KJ Wright's a really good player. Or do you disagree? Do you think a couple of the guys on that roster have more upside than that and have the potential to be blue chip superstars? Until then, you can follow me on Twitter at Seahawks Forever. Subscribe to the channel, support it in all the ways that you can. If you like what I do, you can also leave a rating or a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And then, of course, interact, engage. That's what I enjoy the most. And it also helps traffic for the channel. Get in those comments down below and share your thoughts about this show. And also just share the show is another way you can help as well. Training camp opens on Wednesday. We'll have lots to talk about, a lot more to talk about. I will be back at the latest late Wednesday or Thursday after Mike McDonald has spoken. Share my reaction to some of the things he said, and certainly we'll get some news items between now and then about some of those injuries and about maybe the timeline of some of those players coming back. We are ready to ratchet it up. It is time for this first Mike McDonald's version of the Seahawks to get going. This is Seahawks Forever. I'm Dan. Thank you so much for watching the channel. Forever and always, go Hawks.